right. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Leora. I am she, hers. I'm based in the Bay Area, so thank you for welcoming me to New York in your lime green living room. We're here to have a conversation about the mental health impacts of humanitarian crisis. And so I just want to welcome us into a conversation. It's truly a conversation. And I also want to welcome us into the wisdom in this room. There's lots of wisdom in this room as well. And so we're going to get started by saying a little bit about ourselves. You can get to know these brilliant human beings who are with me. And then we'll actually have a moment to center with who we want to even bring in the room with who's holding crisis outside of this room. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Before I say anything more, a little bit more about me. I'm working with the Archewell Foundation. I get to spend lots of time with the beautiful parents of the Parents Network. So hopefully you've made yourself to the rooftop to spend time with their children at the memorial. And really grateful to be here. So we're going to go down the line with an invitation to say who you are, what brings you to the conversation, and who you are walking with in this moment. And so who I'm walking with in this moment are the educators who are navigating the aftermath of school shootings. I'm going to pass it to Essam.
No pressure.
I thought you were going to stop me.
No, we're going down this way.
Yeah, my name is Essam Daod. I'm a child psychiatrist. What I do usually, I try to bring mental health to the forefront, especially for kids. And I remember that I used to be a surgeon. I used to be a surgeon. And the first mission I did it as a psychiatrist, but I forgot for a while and started practicing surgery again. It's more cool. And after a very successful CPR that I did in Greece with a refugee kid that comes from Syria, I think that I did it. A month later, me and my wife were at home, and we saw a picture. It was a New York Times editorial, and I say, this kid I know. I did it for him a CPR. I saved his life. And she told me, this is Ahmed. I said, what? How did you know? She said, yeah, you sent him on the 28th of October, after the big shipwreck that happened there in Lesbos, in the island. You sent him to the ER, and he was totally fine. But this kid was, for almost 3 days, laying down as a piece of wood. He didn't do anything. They put a needle in his arm. He didn't cry. He didn't sleep. They have to close his eyes because they didn't get dry. He did nothing. He didn't eat, but everything was fine with him physically. Later, they say this devastating trauma, the Syrian devastating trauma. They give it like a title or a scientific title. And Maria, my wife, told me that she used to visit him every day at the department and talk to him. You know, she was doing touring. This is what she did. And she was talking with him Arabic, you know. There was no parents. And the third day, he started moving a little bit. And he got down from bed. He took her by hand, and they go to the glass door of the department. He put his hand, he said in Arabic, the first thing he said in 3 words, أنا بدي أروح البيت. I want to go home. And when Maria said this, I start crying like now, because I understand that I actually did this. That it's again, I forgot the importance of mental health. Like I quit surgery because I think we don't speak too much with the patients, and my boss wasn't happy with this, that I speak too much with them. But again, I become the same. And this is what the moment brings me here, because then I decided, and I swear to my wife that, like, what we're gonna do is no more rescue, no more humanitarian work that will not include mental health. Because what doesn't worth if you create or you give a life to someone, but his soul is dead.
And who are you walking with today?
Are the people of Gaza.
Thank you.
So my name is Annemarie. I'm the Executive Director for the UN Office for Partnerships, and I work in the Secretary General's Office of the United Nations. And mental health has been one of the big priorities for both the SG, as we call him, and the Deputy Secretary General. And for us, we really know that there are 300 million people right at this moment who are living in a humanitarian setting and need humanitarian assistance. And there's something that really struck me. The DSG said, you know, people forget the head is attached to the body. And we're so busy trying to figure out how to support part of that, whereas we need to be thinking all the way through. And so we've been really trying to focus on how can we bring that connection all the way through into everything we do, because we believe the same way. In every humanitarian setting, you need to be thinking about the physical and the mental well-being of every single person, particularly women and children for us right at this moment. And today I am walking with all the people who believe peace is possible.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Lysa Ratliff. I lead a nonprofit called KABOOM. Name kind of implies that we are about play. We build play spaces. Two really important things about our work. One, at the center of our universe is our children, and we think that every single child has the right to play. They also have the right to be surrounded by communities and spaces that they see themselves in, that they see amazing, incredible places that say you belong here. So we build playgrounds, and the other special thing about us is the kids and the community members tell us what they want to see in their play space. And so we go through an incredible process of engagement that sits down and listens and talks and learns how communities and kids like to play and convene. And then we bring, in most cases, volunteers together to realize the dreams of those kids and communities. And we come together in anywhere from 6 months to 6 hours in a day, and we build a play space. And in every case, the play space of that community's dreams. We've been around for about 30 years. Next year is our birthday, and I'm going big next year. I am walking with today, and I'll talk a lot about it while we have our discussion. I'm walking with the community of Uvalde, Texas. Today, they open up Legacy Academy, Legacy Elementary School, which is the elementary school that they built after the shooting at Robb Elementary School. So it's a day of celebration for the community, but it's also a day of reflection and probably great sadness as they open up that school as we sit here and have this discussion.
Thank you, Lisa.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Kaplow, and I'm a child clinical psychologist. Really honored to be here with this amazing panel today. And I direct 2 trauma and grief centers. One is housed in Houston at the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute. The other is at Manning Family Children's Hospital in New Orleans. And my job is really to disseminate evidence-based practices for kids who've experienced any form of trauma or the death of a loved one. And what I've learned in doing this work is that so often children's voices get silenced in the midst of trauma and loss. And there's still a taboo, even for adults, to talk about these things. But I feel like my job is really to elevate those voices and to ensure that children are getting the care they need in the aftermath of tragedy. And sadly, I've had the unfortunate opportunity to intervene in the aftermath of lots of tragedies that have happened actually in Texas, including Hurricane Harvey, the Santa Fe school shooting, the Uvalde school shooting, more recently the Central Texas flooding. And again, if there's anything I've learned is the importance of not just the trauma, but the losses and the grief that children experience. And so really that's where my passion is. That's really what we're trying to do, is help to, again, address those needs as well. And I am carrying with me today all of the families, parents, children, siblings who've lost loved ones in the Central Texas flooding, including the 27 little girls who died at Camp Mystic.
Thank you. I'm going to invite us to have a quiet moment of actually centering why all of us are in this room, and having a quiet moment to connect with who you're walking with too. Sometimes we can go to things and we can hear them, but just as Annemarie was saying, we want to connect the heart and the mind, and you get to too, we get to too. We're just going to have a quiet moment to call in who you're walking with in this moment. The parents in the Parents Network know that we often remind ourselves that our breath is our power. So I'm going to remind us, even this moment, all of us too, because we're a little nervous.
Take a breath.
That all of us in the room, we can take a really big inhale together and an exhale out together. Yeah. Part of being in a conversation around humanitarian crisis is that we get to constantly remind ourselves as both providers but also consumers that we center our humanity in it all, in the way we receive information, in the way we provide it, and that's part of the way that we can actually navigate our own mental health when we're consuming the amount of heartbreak and soul grief in the world. So let's go back to a little bit of a basic, which is like, what are we even talking about when we say humanitarian crisis? There's so much, as we heard, and it can feel really overwhelming, but at its most fundamental, what is a humanitarian crisis? Maybe even what is it not, or even what should it even include that in our conversation in this room and outside the room, it is not. So I'm going to start first with Essam and Annemarie, and then of course, we're in a living room, so we're all just...
I'll leave it for Anne.
Okay, oh no, okay.
No, like a definition, I think it's come from the UN. It's better than
Okay.
telling stories now. And
Okay,
trust me,
Annemarie,
let the
Essam just
audience
pivoted.
have a
Annemarie, first
definition,
you.
and then I will add.
Okay.
So with 300 million people right now are needing humanitarian assistance, they may be away from where they want to be. They are not home. They are not where they want to be. Or they're in their place, but it's not what it used to be. And so all of these people, if you think about 1 in 5 of them, are probably in need of some sort of support that is looking at their mental health and their psychosocial well-being. And that's a lot. It's a lot of people, but it often is forgotten. It's often underfunded. It's often overlooked. And so one of the things, and I'm really excited that we're having this conversation and so many people are here, is to think about what does that mean? What does it mean in terms of our actions of how we support people in these situations? It could be from climate change. It could be from conflict. And it could be from any number of these issues where you're not able to be home or in the home that you were able to be before.
Humanitarian crisis is when you lose the sense of trust and safety from the community, from where you live. It's like breaking the deal with humanity, let's say. When the house, the most safe place for you, where you feel comfortable, can be bombed any moment, or an earthquake can go down. It's a crisis. You don't have the feeling of safety. You can't rely on anything. Only God in a situation like this. And this is how I think when we do any kind of intervention in the beginning is to bring back this kind of feeling of safety, trust, and building the community again. Because this is the first 3 things that break down in a crisis.
In the trauma-informed world, we talk about the 3 pillars of anything that can remind us of our humanity, which are safety, dignity, and belonging. And so we think about that potentially we can define a humanitarian crisis as an experience in which we are stripped of that. And the parents also in this room know that we often talk about the connection of trauma and grief being that something happens to us versus something happening with us and from us. This experience versus this experience. We're going to be talking more about empowered and collaborative pathways to healing, but I'm going to move us to the end of this beautiful green living room to Julie, because when we were earlier this week, we prepped, And when we were talking about it, what came up was like, can we actually just also talk about what is trauma and grief? How do they live together? How do they live separately? And what is their relationship with humanitarian crisis in a mental health space? So Julie was nominated to give us that definition.
Sure.
Yeah.
I do think this is a difference that makes a difference, right? So there is a big difference between trauma and grief. And that doesn't mean that they can't co-occur, because they often do, especially in humanitarian crises. But what we know about trauma is that it is an experience that is either a perceived or real threat to one's life or bodily integrity, or someone else's bodily integrity that we care about. And it can lead to feelings of terror, horror, helplessness, and fear. And post-traumatic stress is what often results from a trauma. And PTSD symptoms can include things like re-experiencing, like feeling like it's happening all over again, or avoidance, not wanting to talk about it or think about it, or hypervigilance, feeling like you're jumpy all the time, or even a pervasive negative mood where you feel like the world is a really dangerous place, or I'm always going to be a victim in life. And what we know about PTSD is that it's actually a normal response to an abnormal event. So really the key is to destigmatize that if you are in one of these crises that we've been talking about, it would actually be weird to not have any symptoms of post-traumatic stress. That being said, we know that PTSD doesn't always go away on its own, and we want to make sure that, especially with kids, that we identify those symptoms early so that we're able to intervene. Now, grief is something very different. Grief is often the experience stemming from bereavement or the death of a loved one. And grief, what we've learned over time, is that it is actually multidimensional, that most people experience challenges in 3 different domains of grief. And the first is separation distress, that is yearning and longing for the person who died. The second is existential or identity distress, so who am I without this person? Or how am I going to get through life without this person here? And the third is circumstance-related distress, and that is exactly what it sounds like. It's being very preoccupied with the way the person died. So I wish I could have intervened, or I wish they didn't have to suffer so much. And even though there are common grief reactions, what we know is that there is no right or wrong way to grieve. There's no set timeline for grief. Our society tells us somehow that we should be over it after a year. That is absolutely not true. And unlike PTSD, grief is not a problem to be fixed. It's actually a natural part of life and a reflection of the love we had for the person who died. So the goal is to not rid children of their grief. The goal is to help them grow around their grief, help to give them the coping skills they need to be able to deal with those waves of grief as they come and go over time. And the final thing I'll say about this is that, because grief and trauma do often co-occur, what we've learned is that sometimes the trauma can get in the way of the grief. And what I mean by that is I actually have been working with a young girl whose sister died in the floods. And whenever this girl's sister's name is, when her sister's name is mentioned, she is immediately overwhelmed with really terrifying thoughts and images of how her sister died. And she just can't hold on to those positive memories. She can't positively reminisce because she, again, is feeling really overwhelmed. So oftentimes what we find is that we really have to deal with the trauma first before we're able to move forward with the grief. So I'll pause there.
Thank you. So many strands to weave there. There's many things. One is that to hear that part of what we want to center in this conversation is the power of the aftermath. That oftentimes, especially in our culture, there's the right now, respond in the week, respond in the year, and then it's done. How many of us have lost someone? People flood our homes with lasagna, and then we're left with a freezer of lasagna. Yeah? And so part of what this panel is inviting us all into is to embrace the life after loss, the power of the aftermath, and the power of creating ways that we show up for each other when the lasagnas need to be eaten with people. Part of Julie, and this is the connection to the next piece, is that the cousin, you're going to correct me in the relationship analogy, but the cousin to PTSD is also post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
And so what this panel also felt was really important is that in the same conversation around mental health of humanitarian crises, that we can hold both. We can hold grief and joy together. We can hold trauma and joy together. And that's actually the expansiveness of what it means to be a human. And it's a way that we can battle us being reduced to the worst thing that has happened to us in a moment. And so I want to invite Lysa and more to share. I know Annemarie will talk about, hopefully you can talk about ways to work with community to build, rebuild, some also storytelling and reclamation, but Lysa, play, the power of play.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah, I'm mindful of this clock, so
I know.
work with me here. It's really interesting, the work that I do, because we build playgrounds, right? And kids and joy and happiness and giggles and all of the things that come with play and are so delightful. And on the other side of it is the very serious part of our work, where there is the absence of play, and where our young children aren't able to even access outdoor spaces, or our young children are suffering some type of trauma or grief, or growing up way too fast and aren't able to just be kids. And so we live in this world at KABOOM that's a little bit of a contradiction, where we are bringing delight and joy and togetherness and community, and yet we're also acknowledging the absence of it. And Uvalde, I'll talk a little bit about that, especially because there's just so much going on in that community today. If you guys could be with me for a second, you talk about the aftermath of something happening. And I think all of us know about Robb Elementary School, and where 19 children lost their lives and 2 teachers, which is tragic. But if you learned anything about what happened while it was happening, it set a path for a level of trauma that almost made it impossible to overcome. So a young man, 19 years old, comes in with an assault weapon and goes into 2 classrooms, and within 4 or 5 minutes, shoots up the place. For 77 minutes, he was in that room with those children and the 2 teachers. The police arrived to the scene immediately, and the parents are outside getting pepper sprayed because they want to go in. They're getting cuffed to hold them back, but they're sitting out there for 77 minutes saying, if nobody's going to go in that room, I'm going in. My baby is in there. And I can't even begin to imagine, first of all, knowing that there's an active shooter in my child's school, or my friend's child's school, or in any school. But then to go there and to know that the police are on site, and they're there for 77 minutes and don't go inside, and I'm trapped outside. So when you talk about this aftermath, where there's an incident and then there's something that happens after that can either help a path of healing, or it can create damage that makes it very difficult to overcome. That's what we walked into in Uvalde. A community that not only was just heartbroken over the loss of these lives, but couldn't understand what went wrong here. It's a community that 40% of the city's funding was going to preparation for the police force. So they were prepared, they were ready for this. And yet, when it happened, they didn't know how to react. So fast forward, we go into the community. We had heard from Archewell that a playground might be something that might help them heal. And so we go into the community to ask the question, like, is this something that would be helpful for you? We actually have a very engaging process that invites everybody in. It's difficult because we're talking about play spaces for kids, and we're talking about kids that aren't even gonna ever be there to enjoy those play spaces. But knowing that not only had this community and these families suffered this loss, but now we had to figure out a way to help them heal and come together and do something that honored their children, the ones that are there and the ones that are gone, was a very difficult situation to walk into, especially because the aftermath of that trauma. And I speak all this because I think we need to be thinking about that tragedies happen, things happen. How we respond to them becomes so important to how we recover from them.
Thank you. I can see Annemarie's like, yes, let me go. Yes.
I think that was so important because it's that response of how you approach it, and it's what we were talking a little bit about together is it has to be together. It has to be a co-creation. It can't be one thing. I think this is good for this, and that's going to be it. And that's not always the easiest thing. And that's when you said you have to take a moment, and that's the moment. And sometimes that moment takes a little bit of time to bring everyone around the table to figure out who is going to be part of who needs to be part of that voice to be part of those solutions. And right now, we've just announced one of the first parts of our Green Tree Acceleration Plan is going to go to be in Chad. This is a country, it's a poor country that has not closed its borders to refugees coming from Sudan, and a huge conflict in Sudan, raging for many years right now. And so how do we think about all of these evidence-based interventions that are available, which are not a lot, but there are a few? How do we get more research to make sure we're getting right interventions out there that'll help people? And then what does this community feel like they want to start with? And this community wanted to start with children. And they really wanted to start on these types of things and bringing people together to be able to have those conversations to figure out the response is so important. And then it's up to us to figure out, okay, how can we help them do that? I'm sure you have that similar.
Yeah, the thing is, to continue what we're talking about, trauma is an experience at the end. What it makes it bad experience is that there is no enough resources, especially for kids, inside resources and when there is also outside resources, to create it as a memory. What happened that it's like you have a lot of input to your computer and the hard drive, that's it. It frees out, it doesn't have, and then it like pops out different folders and then comes back to work. But actually what happened to this computer, that this fragments memories all over. And this is what happened to us during trauma. That's why when there's a shooting, for example, the intervention shouldn't be later. It's very important to have this continuity, months and weeks, but it should be at the same site. What drives me crazy, and I think like once I was like saying how I waste 3 years in surgery, but then it comes to me like it was the blessing for 3 years, because I bring a lot from the trauma room. Like if you want to do a CPR, all people all around the world will do the same CPR. Everyone will do the same CPR. We're the same body. It doesn't matter if you're in Nigeria, Australia, they will have the same CPR course certification. If we are talking about mental health emergency or a CPR for the soul or the mind, there's different types. PFA, not PFA, the
Psychological first aid.
Psychological first aid.
Okay, yeah.
That what the WHO say, this have this own. And why? Why we don't have one that should be implemented? It starts from here, because when we don't have this tool, then it becomes the problem, because then we are not dealing with the trauma, we are dealing with the post-trauma. To deal with trauma, it's really easy. I did it. I do it with kids in refugee camps. I did it in Turkey, thanks to the Archewell Foundation. After I arrived in Gaza in Tab before the Turkish, like less than 24 hours we were there when there was Antakya, the earthquake. So when you work with kids and you give them the resources that they need, give them the narrative, what they happen, they can deal with it. Okay, this is what happened. It's a natural disaster. Our home, someone will help, we will build. But when you keep them without the information, without the knowledge, kids usually, and even human beings, we usually go to the worst scenarios, like catastrophes. That's why even in grief, for example, when we lost someone, we told the parents that they should see the process and to be part of the funeral and somehow, because we don't want them to think, what is it?
Their children or children in the family. Yeah.
So the first thing that we need to do is really to have this common language, that a common technique that all agreed, and to deploy to the forefront of any crisis, and to prepare people, preparedness. This is the game, yeah. And I think this is what Annemarie said, that having this in Chad, for example, is to prepare the people that are receiving more and more people to come.
So the common thread, there's a couple of common threads. I'm going to offer the room because there was a lot that was just surfaced. The common thread is, and I'm going to go back to safety, dignity, and belonging, and focus on the dignity piece, because often what happens, especially in humanitarian crisis, is that it's the natural and understandable desire for the responder to want to show up, do exactly what we think needs to be done at someone. We've all been added. Yes, added. That's not a verb. Potentially should be. And what Annemarie is reminding us is the power of the pause, either structurally or literally one-on-one, to center what is our own stuff that's coming up, that's blocking us or informing the way we're coming at someone, and instead to pause and say, ooh, is my own discomfort with suffering and grief blocking me from seeing my child and what they need? Or is my own grief bias blocking me from understanding what this community might want and knows how to do without me getting involved? So I want to move. There's this beautiful, I hope you know, the beautiful philosopher Bayo Akomolafe, and he has this question. He says, what if the crisis is not the crisis, but the way we respond to the crisis? You know, I know, it's like, oof, it's a oof. And so I want to bring that to this panel, like, what comes up for you when you hear that? What if the crisis is not the crisis, but the way that we respond to the crisis? Yeah, he's ready, okay.
I want, yeah.
Yeah.
2016, I'm entering a camp, me and my wife, and 5 minutes later, I saw a girl flying in the, my wife just pushed a girl on the ground. And my wife is the sweetest person on earth. And I look at Maria, I say, Maria, what happened? I said, I don't know, look. And she was bleeding from here. Like, she said, I don't know, I felt a lot of pain. And then I did this. And this girl just put her nails until Maria's bleeding. So we went to this girl, and I say, hey, honey, what's the problem? And she said, you are from the people who will stay or you will go? And I don't understand what she's saying. She said, you gonna stay or you gonna go? Tell me. And then I understand that this girl is sick of this very fast turnover of wonderful, wonderful volunteers that came at that time. Even the Guardians wrote about the volunteers, that there was a lot of volunteers coming to help. She was like, khalas, it's enough. Like, you wanna love me forever. Don't love me for 2 weeks and then leave me. Then I understand that actually I called it a humanitarian attachment disorder because it's what's happening. The parents are disabled, traumatized, they are in a different country, they are not functioning, trauma, sometimes they are dead. And this kid is looking for a safety, for a parental object to connect with. And this volunteer is coming with a huge heart, give everything 24 hours to 7, but in 2 weeks you have to go back home. And he leaves this kid, and then the kid looking for someone else. So this is like small, something that I witnessed, like I did it also. That's when we also switched from volunteer-based organization to organization that have hired people to do this work. Something that I never thought that I can be a problem, but I was for 1 year almost.
Sorry. I thought I want to get some feedback on this one. We're an organization, and we've done a lot of work in Uvalde, but we go into communities that we don't live in. And we bring volunteers with us. So there's, we got 200 people with us to build this playground. Say hi and let's have a love fest. That's kind of within our DNA. And the big thing that we really recognize is that trust building on the front end. Our aim is to build, keep, and never lose trust with the communities that we go into, because we walk in as strangers most of the time. Like, these people don't know us, they've never met us, and we're asking them to trust us with their most sacred, their children. And with us comes, we bring 150 volunteers now. And in Uvalde, so there's, what happened after the shooting that I described, and then there's the beautiful work that I witnessed that we were a part of that happened after that, where we went into the community months later and had to sit with the families of the who lost their children and talk about building a playground and do it in a way that, the first time I sat with a room full of families, it was walking into a room and I didn't even want to speak out loud. I looked into their faces and they're like this. They're angry. They're like, why am I even sitting here talking to this lady about a playground? And we had to go in and we had to figure out, in an environment that a community that was also very flooded with outsiders who came in and out and disappeared. And, there's this term called, I'm not going to get it right, but it's just basically like crisis capitalism, where, there's a crisis
The
somewhere.
crisis industrial complex.
Yeah, there you go. I don't have all the terms right, but where people come in somewhere in a crisis and they are personally capitalizing on it versus serving the community in need. And so what we had to do was, one, establish trust. And then two, just make sure we're listening, that, we're here to build this space if you want to build it. We are here to offer something that might give you a little bit of a pathway to healing. Let's talk about that. And we're not going anywhere. We are here for you. We are here how often you need us. We will step away when you need space. And in doing that, we were able to, in 2 weeks, we'll build our 10th play space there with a community that has just as much energy as they had on the first play space in 2022. But we were able to sit with the families on that first play space and design a playground that celebrated and honored and brought to life the unique identities of each of their children. And if you can only imagine, they're still going through this kind of post, I want to use trauma and grief wrong, but they're just going through this post-traumatic event where they are trying to figure things out, and they're also saying, how can my child show up in this space? And fast forward to 3-4 years later, where we're building our 10th play space with them, what we have the opportunity to do is to go in somewhere and establish that trust and to do everything not to lose that trust and stay and lock hands, hold their hands until our collective work is done, whatever that looks like for them, not for us.
Thank you.
And it takes a lot of humility and a lot of protection, especially when you're bringing other volunteers in. Your first loyalty is to the people of that community, and you don't want anyone coming and capitalizing off of trauma there. You want people who are going to show up in service to and in support of their healing and their problem solving. And so on the other side of things, and like I said, we're building 10, we're in our 10th playground. We've actually done 12, but we professionally installed 2, but 10 playgrounds with this community that is bringing 150 people out every single time, bringing the food, bringing the joy, bringing the laughter, bringing their kids, bringing their memories, keeping the children who lost their lives alive in that space, and knowing that we didn't disappear, that we came in with all our authenticity, and it's not going to happen every time. But I share this story because we all have the power to do that. When we offer our support or when we offer our services, we better be ready to follow through on it.
Thank you. Beautiful.
And I think that follow-through is also to the people who serve. And so the people who stay. If you're in Haiti, Haiti's a really difficult situation right now. You're away from your family. If you're someone who is from Haiti and working on a humanitarian setting in Haiti, you're also thinking about your family and your family's situation. And I think that's one of the things we don't advocate for enough is how do we serve the people who serve?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
they are giving it every day. They're not going away after 2 weeks. And we need those 2-week people. We need those
Yeah.
we need volunteers. We need everyone. But we also need to be thinking more about what are the services in terms and what are the kinds of support that really matter for the people who are serving every day in these really, really difficult situations, where it be in Texas, or it could be in Chad or Lebanon or anywhere right now in the world. And I don't think their voice is heard enough.
That's
and
right.
I'd love to make sure that we start to really think very much about what that looks like going forward. And I'm sure you have lots of ideas about that too.
Well, no, I'm so glad you brought that up because I do think it is a major issue because, impacted people often have a hard time helping other impacted people. It's a real struggle. And I think that, there's vicarious trauma, vicarious grief that you carry with you when you are immersed in it, when you're seeing it, when you're hearing these stories every single day. The good news is there's also such thing as vicarious resilience, and I think that is what drives so many of us probably in this room to be helpers, is this idea that you can actually feel empowered watching other people come through their struggles. The last thing I'll say that you reminded me of is, there is such thing as good grief, and it's such a tricky balance because obviously we want to bear witness to people's pain. We want to acknowledge people's pain after they have loss. But what we've learned over time is that kids and adults experience adaptive sides of grief that are incredibly helpful and healing. So for example, with separation distress, kids can find ways of feeling connected to the person who died. And as you described, parents can feel more connected to their kids through the playground. With existential distress, we hear kids saying things all the time like, I don't know how I'm going to get through life without my dad. But we also hear them saying things like, I want to live the kind of life my dad would have wanted me to live, or I want to do things that would have made my dad proud of me. That is the adaptive side of that dimension. And with circumstance-related distress, I will never forget, even young kids actually have a strong desire to change the circumstances of the death into something that can help other people not have to suffer in the same way. So I remember working with a 9-year-old little boy whose father died in a tragic plane crash. And when I asked him, what do you want to be when you grow up? He said, I want to be an engineer so I can make planes that don't break anymore. And we hear this all the time. I want to be an ER doctor so I can save lives the way I wish they had saved my sister. Or I want to, raise money for breast cancer because my mom died of breast cancer. And so as we're thinking about, trying to help kids who are really suffering in their grief and move them out of those more stuck points where they feel like they can't go on, we also want to harness and grow those more adaptive grief reactions that we see naturally occurring, even among those who are helpers, even among those who are in this humanitarian work.
Thank you, Julie. We're coming to the end of our time together, not the end of supporting and holding humanitarian crisis in the conversation, but the end of this time. One of the practices of embracing, rehumanizing ourselves in the context of humanitarian crisis is actually embracing the power of question. We as humans want answers. Tell me what to do. Tell me how to handle. And the art of navigating aftermath is actually tell me how to hold. Or hold me, open me. So I'm going to invite us to go down the line. We're going to start with you, Julie, down whatever, you're to my left, with a question that you want to kind of linger in the room for us to hold.
Sure. I think a question that I've really been grappling with is how do we ensure that all children, not just in this country, but literally across the world, receive access to best practice care after a tragedy? So really thinking about, how do we do that? Is it, through scaling up the behavioral health workforce? Is it providing more of a continuum of care? Is it through telehealth? Is it through, whatever the case may be? But right now, there is a real problem that we're having in terms of not everyone has access. And so being able to navigate that, it's something that myself, my entire team, we're really grappling with that question right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, quickly. I'm thinking about all the sessions this morning, and what can we do to be role models for our children? I think we're putting a lot of pressure on our kids to change their ways, to change their behavior, to change their habits, to put down the phones. What can we do as adults to be role models for our children and to care for them as they get through the most precious period of their life, which is their childhood?
So when Pandora opened the box and all of these crazy bad things happened in the world, the thing that was left in the box was hope. And so my question that I ask a lot is, what gives me hope?
I'm good in answering questions. I don't know, really. Question. I think, why? Like, why this should be an issue? Why we should gather all together to talk about something that is obvious? Why children should suffer? Why children should die?
That's it?
Yeah.
The question that I'm going to offer us to close, although why is the profound one, is how do we stay human in an inhuman time? And just to really recognize that what we are seeing and witnessing, what we are also doing and contributing to, it is necessary to acknowledge the deep inhumanity that we're swimming through right now, and how to reclaim moments where we can hold on to our humanness. We're so grateful, Julie and Lysa and Annemarie and Essam, for offering us moments of that. Thank you for being here, and the rest of your day.